Sword I got from Rose and Sword Armory at the Renaissance Fair here in Maryland. It's really made by the guys from Baltimore Knife and Steel, obviously in Baltimore. They are the people that do Man-at-Arms Reforged. And I thought this was a good opportunity to go over just some general stuff about blade maintenance, also repairing things. This is part of the reason that I really like a threaded pommel, even though a lot of people out there think it's not historically accurate and all sorts of stuff, or it's not aesthetically pleasing. There's a lot of ways to get around that. I mean, historically accuracy-wise, there is some evidence that threaded pommels have been around for a long time. We've got some 15th, 16th century texts talking about, you know, unthreading your pommel and things like that. So obviously it might be more historically accurate than we think it is. But on the aesthetic end, obviously this guy has been made to be aesthetically the same thing as a peened pommel, while still having the deconstructibility of a threaded pommel. But the real reason that I wanted to make a video here is because wood, of course, is not possible to know exactly how it's done, right? So when you take a piece of wood and you carve it down into something like this, there's no way of knowing if there's microfracture already in the wood, if there's some sort of imperfection that'll make it break, all sorts of stuff. So there's nothing really you can do to prevent something like this from happening, so it's going to happen to, you know, the best sword maker in the world sometimes. We have a wooden handle that fractured right down the middle, right where the work was done. So there was probably already some sort of imperfection in the wood, or maybe it was actually two woods joined together. I'm not 100% sure there. It kind of looks like two woods, or it might have been two separate stains. But either way, this is not something we can really prevent, so we're just going to do some work to clean it up and get it put back together and get it back to its original working condition, which shouldn't really be that hard at all. So something to be said here about just handle construction in general. A lot of people talk about how a system that is built under pressure, like a threaded pommel or even a peened pommel actually is, for most of them, is inferior to a system that is built under, you know, extra tight fittings. So obviously this was made not to be tight enough so that it can come off if we need it to. So we can deconstruct, clean, fix, replace, whatever we need to do. And a lot of people will claim that that is inferior to other constructions, because if we then, you know, slide this down onto our sword, and then the only thing that holds that in place is the strength of this handle being pressurized by this pommel, right? So that's how all of this will come together, and that's how all the pressure will arrive on each of these pieces. This will stay here because the pommel, because the pommel is pressing the handle, which is compressing this wood, which is causing this to tighten up against the base of the blade there. Let's see, right there, yeah, all right. And a lot of people will claim that because wood expands and contracts, this is going to have issues over the course of a season. It might have issues over the course of a few years. And while it's absolutely true that wood does expand and contract, that's a little bit misguided in the concepts of how this wood actually expands and contracts. If we take a really close look at it here under some light, let's see if I can get a good one. Yeah. We can see that the grain is traveling from left to right. So this is made along the grain. We don't have grain going this way. We have grain going this way, right? And if we imagine the construction of what wood actually is, it's basically a bunch of tubes or straws that carry the nutrients, the water, everything for the tree up to where it's attempting to go. When these straws fill, they expand. These straws are not going to expand this way. They're going to expand this way, right? So in the winter, this will be thinner than it is in the summer. It will not be shorter or longer. It'll be thinner or thicker, which if we place it along the chain of interaction here, it thickening and thinning doesn't really matter. we're not going to lose the correct position of the pommel over the course of a year if this pommel is tight enough. If this pommel is loose, then yes, we'll have some issues with, the micro fraction of an inch that we lose when this expands and contracts lengthwise, which it does very, very, very small amounts, will cause issues with our whole condensing here, our whole pressurized system. If we get it tight enough, we're going to have no issues with this whole thing. It'll be slightly looser than it is when it's slightly tighter in the summer. So really we want to be going for a fall feel, which is great because we're in the fall right now. So if I get this at its perfect tensity right now, then the tension should be able to last throughout the winter and last throughout the summer. Yeah, that basically covers my feelings about pummels and threadedness and wooden handles and all the rest. What I really wanted to discuss today was how to go about, one, repairing this, two, putting this whole thing back together in proper tension and proper form, and of course how to really make it so this sort of thing isn't probably going to happen again. A lot of people think epoxies or things like that are good for bringing these guys back together. But wood is actually notoriously bad along the end grain, which is right there, right? So if we were to try and glue these pieces together along the length, that would hold pretty well. If we were going to attempt to glue them along the end grain, then we're going to deal with some issues. So what we're actually going to do here is do a combination of making sure that this is glued together well, which of course, again, since we're talking about end grain, is going to be a little bit more difficult than something else. But the real thing that we're going to attempt to do here is make sure that this, our pommel, is really locked down onto this thread, so that once this is glued together, the reason that this will have issues is if there's a little bit of looseness in between the bottom of this and this pommel, all of a sudden all the tension is going to come onto the middle of this handle, all the pressure from using it and fighting with it. So obviously I need to put this disclaimer out there, of course, that this sword was used in active live combat, and that's when this handle broke. And also this pommel had loosened up a little bit from the vibrations and everything, and that had made it so that all of this just kind of fractured. So what we're going to do today is we are going to use some good old-fashioned Elmer's wood glue, the maximum strength version, because we're going with end grain here, so this is not going to do as good of a job as we hope it would. Nothing is really going to do as great a job as we hope it would along this end grain, which is a little bit of an issue, but not too much of an issue, because what we're also going to do is use the original Loctite here, Loctite Blue, which is made for temporary removable application using a tool. So if we were to use this Loctite on this thread, this guy would be locked down on here pretty much permanently until we took a wrench or something of the sort and really gave this guy some serious tension. So if everything goes according to plan and this is clean enough and everything is applied properly, this will create a nice bond here, a good enough of a bond here, that as long as the tension is not taken off, it will separate that pressure and that vibration along the whole handle, not just at this middle point. And to do that, we're going to use this Loctite to keep this guy locked down fully, even during live combat. Before we dive in on getting this guy glued up, we're just going to go over what exactly we need in order to do this properly. Of course, we're going to need some wood glue, naturally. What I've got here is a 22 caliber barrel brush that'll allow us to kind of get down in there once we've really put this glue together, because we don't want any glue on the inside of this, right? So we're going to glue along these edges and put them together, and we don't want any glue locking up in here. I'm going to put this back on the sword while the glue is wet and use that as my vise, but I could also use a vise to kind of press this together and really, really focus on keeping the balance straight and all that sort of stuff. But I'm obviously going to go a different way, but if I did that, I would absolutely need to make sure that there's no glue on the inside here, or maybe putting it back on the blade would be a problem later, and we'd get some weird tension issues as the wood is pressed on from the side and all sorts of stuff. So to go about this properly, we're going to need our wood glue, our barrel brush to get on the inside, and then some normal pads to kind of dip in this water here and clean up on the outside. The one thing that I really like about Elmer's carpenter glue is that, let's see, if we get down there, we can see it says easy water cleanup. That just means that all we have to do is take a little bit of water and rub it on there, and any excess will come off just like that. We don't really got to worry about, it not coming off either on the inside or the outside. So this glass of water is just to really clean up the excess that comes up on the outside and the inside here. And that's really important because, again, if we have anything excess on there, we'll get some weird tension, some weird friction issues, and we might just be right back here again. Here we are post-gluing. If we get really close in here, like really close, if the phone will, yes, there we go, we can hardly even see the glue, which is exactly what we want. We want to, if you get really good visual there, you can see a little bit of glue along that line. And this is literally, I literally finished gluing it up seconds ago. So we just want to make sure that we get enough water in there, get enough everything in there, and really clean it up so we have nothing excess coming out the sides. You might feel like it's working not quite as well if you can't see the glue, yada yada yada. That's completely not true. The glue on the inside is obviously doing its job. And then there's our barrel brush, post glue, all wet and goopy. That's exactly what we want. It means we got all the glue out of the inside. Alright, so we haven't thread locked this down yet. I'm using it to create tension, not to permanently attach it yet, or mostly permanently attach it yet. And part of the reason there is because I got this on there as fast as I could so it locks properly. And if you can see, our sword and our well, completely blanking, crossguard are not lined up properly. So if I'd already thread locked this, we'd be in a little bit of an uh-oh. So I'm focused right now just on this part right here, and after that dries, we'll come back, apply the thread lock, and really line up everything. So here we are, an hour, maybe two later. I just kind of went off and did other stuff, and it looks great. Of course, we're not going to Loctite up yet either, because we just want to make sure that this is, solid. It's well done. I'm pretty sure it is, but of course, I can't pat myself on the back yet without knowing that it's really going to take a beating again. So even though the Loctite is the thing that's really going to save the tension from falling on this middle joint, we want to make sure that the middle joint can take some tension still, just in case something goes wrong with the Loctite. Obviously, we want, a lot of different levels of protection for this joint here. And if worse comes to worse, it's a threaded pummel, the blade can come apart, so just carve out a new handle and replace the thing just easily. So now what we're going to do is take it apart and give it a test. There we are. We just unscrewed our pummel, took this guy out of pressure, and we seem pretty good. Again, it's only been about an hour and a half, but I think I'm not going to slam this guy down because, mid joints don't, end grain doesn't glue too well, so we're not going to try it with a serious weight on it. But it seems like it is pretty solid, at least solid enough for the impact it's going to be taking. Alright, now, we want to make sure as we put this blade back together that our blade lines up well with our transition to the tang inside of this little slot that's been cut into the crossguard. So that should come down right like that and have almost no wiggle room. Alright, so we should be able to give it a solid pressure and have almost no wiggle room, which we have just a little bit of side-to-side motion, which is exactly what we want. Alright, so here is where we take, if we take a look at this side, I don't know if you can, yep, we can see on the camera, that obviously one side of this has more exposure to the elements than the other side. And this is where we need to adjust our handle to fit with how the blade was designed to take that handle. We don't want to be changing anything as we put this blade back together. So the last thing we really need to go over before I put the oil back on this blade is, of course, I'm going to go take it outside and give it a few swings with this new handle. Tonight I will be practicing some combat with it, so we will see what happens to this handle under some serious impacts. One thing that we need to note is the difference between a burr and a nick. So if we ran our finger down here, we can see this on the camera. I don't really feel that with my finger. I mean, I do, but it doesn't catch my finger, which means it's a nick. It's just a depression in the blade. It's a little bit of missing metal, and that's completely fine. If we continue down, my finger catches on this guy right here, and that means that this is what we refer to as a burr. A burr is dangerous. A burr can be very dangerous, right? See, a little bit of metal just came off there. It's now on the table. That's fine. But what we really need to worry about is if I was fighting with someone and this burr caught them, and if it was a little bit bigger, it could do some serious actual damage to a person. Could cause some serious bleeding. So what we do is we take a file, like this guy here. This is just a Nicholson file, pretty cheap. I think it cost me $8. And we just take it and run it along the blade. Now the important thing is if we take a very close look at the blade, we will see the grain running this way along the blade, right? So wood is not the only thing that has grains, and grains in the blade are very important. We do not want to go cross-sectionally to the grain, as that will leave scratches and all sorts of stuff, and will actually be making our edge inferior. We want to go along with the grain already built into the metal, which is this direction. So we'll be taking our file and just to take off these burrs going down the length of the blade. And there we go. It took me about a minute. And you can definitely see the marks left behind by this file. If you have a major problem with these, I don't. This blade is of course meant for combat, so I do not have any problem with these marks being left behind on the blade, as they are going to be the least of the marks that are going to be left on this blade after I use it for quite a while. But if you really care, a Scotch-Brite pad or some steel wool or anything like that, just run along this length of the blade with some decent effort. We'll polish it right back up, and you won't have any of this marking left. Yeah, so that's about it for right now. I'll be back later with this same blade to do the Loctite after tonight's test.